Take it and don't come back.
He replaced his wife overnight. But what happened next destroyed everything he built. 22 years of marriage ended in a single morning, and the most unsettling part of it all was that she didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't break. She simply listened. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you're drawn to real-life stories like this, make sure you subscribe now, because the story you're about to hear is one you won't forget. At exactly 7:14 a.m., Linda Calloway pushed open the front door of the house she had lived in for over 2 decades. She had just come back from an overnight shift, exhausted but steady, expecting the same quiet routine she had followed for years. But that morning, something was different. The house felt still in a way that didn't belong. And then she saw it. A suitcase sitting in the hallway. Not hers. His. Positioned neatly, like a decision that had already been made long before she walked through that door. Michael didn't hesitate. He stepped out of the kitchen already dressed, already prepared. Holding his coffee like this was just another normal morning. He didn't ask her to sit down. He didn't soften his voice. He simply said he was leaving. Said he was in love with someone else. Said he had already spoken to a lawyer. Just like that. 22 years reduced to a few sentences delivered without emotion, without hesitation, without even the courtesy of pretending it hurt. Linda didn't react the way most people would. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw anything. She walked past him, pulled out a chair, and sat down at the kitchen table where she had spent years building a life that, in that moment, no longer existed. She looked at him carefully, not with anger, but with clarity, and asked one question. How long? And when he answered 4 years, something shifted quietly inside her. For years of lies. For years of sharing a life with someone who had already chosen another one. For years of being present in a marriage that had already ended without her knowing. That was the moment most people would collapse. But Linda didn't. Because what Michael didn't understand, what he had never taken the time to see, was that Linda wasn't fragile. She had just been quiet for a very long time. Long before Michael, before the marriage, before the house and the children, Linda had learned how to survive without depending on anyone. She grew up in a small home where stability was never guaranteed and where strength wasn't something you talked about. It was something you lived. Her mother worked constantly. Her father was there, but never really present. And Linda figured out early that if anything was going to work, she would have to make it work herself. She carried that mindset into everything she did. School, work, relationships. She didn't need recognition. She needed results. When she met Michael, she wasn't looking to be saved. She already had a career, a future, a life she had built on her own terms. But love has a way of reshaping priorities. And slowly, over time, Linda adjusted. She stepped back from her career so his could grow. She focused on raising their children. She managed the home, the schedules, the finances, the invisible structure that held everything together. And she did it so well that eventually it looked effortless. And when something looks effortless, people stop noticing it altogether. Michael built his success believing it was his alone. He didn't see the systems Linda had created. He didn't see the sacrifices she made. He didn't see how much of his life functioned because she made it function. And that blindness became the foundation of his biggest mistake. Because when someone becomes invisible to you, you start believing they are replaceable. So when he walked out that morning, he believed he was leaving someone who would fall apart. Someone who needed him. Someone who wouldn't know what to do next. But within 48 hours, Linda proved how wrong that assumption was. She made 3 phone calls. Not emotional calls. Strategic ones. A lawyer, a financial advisor, and a forensic accountant. That last call changed everything. Because while Michael thought he had planned his exit carefully, he overlooked something important. Years earlier, He had started a side business using money from their joint account. At the time, Linda had signed documents he barely remembered. But Linda remembered everything. She kept records. She paid attention. And those documents, the ones he dismissed, turned out to matter more than anything else. When a financial review began, the picture that emerged was very different from the one Michael expected. That business he believed was entirely his was legally shared, which meant Linda had a claim to it. But that was only the beginning. As the investigation went deeper, more details surfaced. Accounts he hadn't disclosed, transfers that didn't align, patterns that raise questions. The kind of details that don't disappear once they're seen. Linda didn't rush. She didn't react emotionally. She moved carefully, step by step, building something stronger than anger. She built a case. While Michael was focused on starting a new life, Linda was quietly dismantling the version of reality he thought he had secured. And by the time they reached court, the balance of power had shifted completely. Michael walked in expecting a simple process, a quick resolution, a clean separation. What he encountered instead was the result of months of quiet, precise preparation. The evidence spoke clearly. The financial records told a story he could no longer control, and the outcome reflected that. Linda was awarded the majority of the marital assets, her share of the business, the house, custody of their youngest child. Everything Michael believed he had protected was no longer entirely his. But the most powerful moment didn't come from the ruling. It came at the very end when the judge asked Linda if she had anything she wanted to say. She stood up calmly, adjusted her jacket, and looked directly at the man she had spent 22 years supporting. Her voice was steady, her expression clear, and her words were simple. She said she had spent 22 years making him feel bigger than he was, and that she was finally learning how strong she had always been. There was no anger in her voice, no need to prove anything, just truth. And in that moment, everyone in that room understood something that Michael had missed for years. This was never about revenge. It was about recognition, about a woman who had spent years being overlooked finally being seen, not by others, but by herself. 6 months later, Linda had rebuilt her life on her own terms. She returned to work, bought a smaller home, created a space that belonged entirely to her. Her children saw her differently, not as someone who endured, but as someone who rose. And Michael? He thought he was starting over, but in reality, he had already lost everything that mattered. So here's the question that stays with you after hearing this story. If everything you built disappeared in a single moment, would you break? Or would you rebuild something even stronger? Let me know in the comments what you would have done. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time, because the next story might hit even harder than this one.